I'm reading today from Aion, Researches into the Phenomenology of the Self by C.G. Jung. In order to maintain continuity, I'll read the last couple of sentences of paragraph 98. So if Christian metaphysics clings to the Privatio Boni, it is giving expression to the tendency always to increase the good and diminish the bad. The Privatio Boni may therefore be a metaphysical truth. I presume no judgment on this matter. I must only insist that in our field of experience, white and black, light and dark, good and bad, are equivalent opposites which always predicate one another. Paragraph 99. This elementary fact was correctly appreciated in the so-called Clementine Homilies, a collection of Gnostic Christian writings dating from about AD 150. The unknown author understands good and evil as the right and left hand of God, and views the whole of creation in terms of syzygies, or pairs of opposites. In much the same way, the follower of Bardesanes, Marinus, sees good as light and pertaining to the right hand, and evil as dark and pertaining to the left hand. The left also corresponds to the feminine. Thus, in Irenaeus, Sophia Pronikos is called Sinistra. Clement finds this altogether compatible with the idea of God's unity. Provided that one has an anthropomorphic God image, and every God image is anthropomorphic in a more or less subtle way, the logic and naturalness of Clement's view can hardly be contested. At all events, this view, which may be some 200 years older than the quotations given above, proves that the reality of evil does not necessarily lead to Manichaean dualism, and so does not endanger the unity of the God image. As a matter of fact, it guarantees that unity on a plane beyond the crucial differences between the Yahwistic and the Christian points of view. Yahweh is notoriously unjust, and injustice is not good. The God of Christianity, on the other hand, is only good. There is no denying that Clement's theology helps us to get over this contradiction in a way that fits the psychological facts. Footnote in reference to the Clementine Homilies. Harnack ascribes the Clementine Homilies to the beginning of the 4th century and is of the opinion that they contain no source that could be attributed with any certainty to the 2nd century. He thinks that Islam is far superior to this theology. Yahweh and Allah are unreflected God images, whereas in the Clementine Homilies there is a psychological and a reflective spirit at work. It is not immediately evident why this should bring about a disintegration of the God concept, as Harnack thinks. Fear of psychology should not be carried too far. Paragraph 100. It is therefore worth following up Clement's line of thought a little more closely. God, he says, appointed 2 kingdoms and 2 ages, determining that the present world should be given over to evil, because it is small and passes away, but he promised to preserve the future world for good, because it is great and eternal. Clement goes on to say that this division into 2 corresponds to the structure of man. The body comes from the female, who is characterized by emotionality. The spirit comes from the male, who stands for rationality. He calls body and spirit the 2 triads. Footnote: the female or somatic triad consists of desire, anger, and grief. The male of reflection, knowledge, and fear. See the triad of functions in Phenomenology of the Spirit in Fairy Tales, Part 1 of Volume 9, paragraphs 425 and following. My goodness, no wonder the Christians got into patriarchy. Going on, man is a compound of two mixtures, literally pastes, the female and the male, wherefore also two ways have been laid before him, those of obedience and of disobedience to law, and two kingdoms have been established, the one called the kingdom of heaven, and the other the kingdom of those who are now rulers upon earth. Of these two, the one does violence to the other. Moreover, these two rulers are the swift hands of God. That is a reference to Deuteronomy 32:39. Quote, I will kill and I will make to live, unquote. He kills with the left hand and saves with the right. Quote, these two principles have not their substance outside of God, for there is no other primal source, nor have they been sent forth from God as animals, for they were of the same mind with him. But from God were sent forth the four first elements, hot and cold, moist and dry. In consequence of this, he is the Father of every substance, but not of the knowledge which arises from the mixing of the elements. For when these were combined from without, choice was begotten in them as a child. Unquote. That is to say, through the mixing of the four elements, inequalities arose, which caused uncertainty, and so necessitated decisions or acts of choice. The four elements form the fourfold substance of the body, and also of evil. This substance was carefully discriminated and sent forth from God, but when it was combined from without, according to the will of him who sent it forth, there arose as a result of the combination the preference which rejoices in evils. Paragraph 101. The last sentence is to be understood as follows. The fourfold substance is eternal and God's child, but the tendency to evil was added from outside to the mixture willed by God. Thus, evil is not created by God or by anyone else, nor was it projected out of him, nor did it arise of itself. Peter, who is engaged in these reflections, is evidently not quite sure how the matter stands. Paragraph 102. It seems as if, without God's intending it, and possibly without his knowing it, the mixture of the four elements took a wrong turning, though this is rather hard to square with Clement's idea of the opposite hands of God doing violence to one another. Obviously, Peter, the leader of the dialogue, finds it rather difficult to attribute the cause of evil to the Creator in so many words. Paragraph 103. The author of the Homilies espouses a patrine Christianity distinctly high church or ritualistic in flavor. This, taken together with his doctrine of the dual aspect of God, brings him into close relationship with the early Jewish Christian church, where, according to the testimony of Epiphanius, we find the Ebionite notion that God had two sons, an elder one, Satan, and a younger one, Christ. Michias, one of the speakers in the dialogue, suggests as much when he remarks that if good and evil were begotten in the same way, they must be brothers. Paragraph 104. In the Jewish Christian Apocalypse, the ascension of Isaiah, we find in the middle section Isaiah's vision of the seven heavens through which he was wrapped. First he saw Samael and his hosts, against whom a great battle was raging in the firmament. The angel then wafted him beyond this into the first heaven and led him before a throne. On the right of the throne stood angels who were more beautiful than the angels on the left. Those on the right all sang praises with one voice, but the ones on the left sang after them, and their singing was not like the singing of the first. In the second heaven, all the angels were more beautiful than in the first heaven, and there was no difference between them. either here or in any of the higher heavens. Evidently, Samael still has a noticeable influence on the first heaven, since the angels on the left are not so beautiful there. Also, the lower heavens are not so splendid as the upper ones, though each surpasses the other in splendor. The devil, like the Gnostic archons, dwells in the firmament, and he and his angels presumably correspond to astrological gods and influences. The gradation of splendor, going all the way up to the topmost heaven, shows that his sphere interpenetrates with the divine sphere of the Trinity, whose light in turn filters down as far as the lowest heavens. This paints a picture of complementary opposites balancing one another, like right and left hands. Significantly enough, this vision, like the Clementine Homilies, belongs to the pre-Manichaean period, 2nd century, when there was as yet no need for Christianity to fight against its Manichaean competitors. It might easily be a description of a genuine yin-yang relationship, a picture that comes closer to the actual truth than the Privatio Boni. Moreover, it does not damage monotheism in any way, since it unites the opposites just as Yang and Yin are united in Tao, which the Jesuits quite logically translated as God. It is as if Manichaean dualism first made the Fathers conscious of the fact that until then, without clearly realizing it, they had always believed firmly in the substantiality of evil. This sudden realization might well have led them to the dangerously anthropomorphic assumption that what man cannot unite, God cannot unite either. The early Christians, thanks to their greater unconsciousness, were able to avoid this mistake. Footnote: since there is no trace in Pseudo-Clement of the defensive attitude towards Manichaean dualism, which is so characteristic of later writers, it is possible that the homilies date back to the beginning of the 3rd century, if not earlier.